grandmother. Tell me about when you were a little girl.
Well, my dear, long ago in the early part of the 21st century, many had forgotten that human life and the earth upon which it depends are precious. The careless ways of humankind polluted the air, the water, the food, the land, and our bodies and minds. In these times, women bore the greatest burdens. With dignity, we took on the essential acts of tending the land and collecting water, though our lives and livelihoods were constantly threatened. And while the wisdom that was needed to heal the earth had been in our bones for ages, even that precious knowledge was ignored by those who claimed to know what was best for us. Moved by this wisdom, 30 women from around the world came together. Each woman understood the problem of having too little or the problem of having too much, and they began to weave a new story. A story of women leaders transforming their own communities, sharing resources and restoring balance upon the earth. A story rooted in the undeniable fact that when women thrive, communities thrive. In this story, our wisdom was respected, and those who wished to help began to listen. We recognized our interdependence, exchanging solutions like gifts. Around the globe, women joined hands and the story took root. They hosted trainings, learned sustainable technologies, and taught others. People across regions stepped forward in support. Speaking out, their message was heard. They shared knowledge and linked strategies. Real change blossomed as communities took action to advocate, innovate, and preserve. We began to remember the preciousness of the simple things like water, land, and seeds. We remembered to work together. We remembered our real power. After this long journey, we now stand safely on the land. In balance, men and women together, caring for each other with visionary solutions, preserving the earth for those who will follow. We have finally come home.
Aloha mai, aloha aina kākou, o Kahea Pacheco ko uinoa, no puna mai au ma ka mokopuni o Hawaii nei. Hello, friends and relatives. I'm Kahea Pacheco. I'm from Mokuokeawe, or the island of Hawaii, and I'm so honored to be here with you all and with Women's Earth Alliance sisters and fellow co-directors, Melinda, Kramer, and Amira Diamond. Yeah. Let's be real. Things are heavy right now. We are watching environmental protections vanish. Corporations are doubling down on destruction. Institutions are crumbling. And systems that were meant to protect our people and planet are failing. And it's a lot. It's a lot. So maybe we can just take a deep breath together. Just one deep breath in and out. Because here's what's also true. We are not powerless. We are not waiting. Across every frontline, people are already protecting our water, restoring our land, building sustainable economies, and holding the fabric of our communities together, whether the world is watching or not. That's the power of grassroots action. And this is what Melinda, Amira, and I are here to talk about today.
The video you saw at the opening is not a fiction. Those 30 women coming together, that was real. It was almost 20 years ago, and I can still feel the moment when we first came together like it was yesterday. 30 grassroots women leaders from 26 countries, Kazakhstan, El Salvador, South Africa, India. We all traveled to Mexico City, drawn together by a shared question. What could the world look like if women protecting the earth were supported and united? For years, many of us had worked in isolation, under-resourced, under-supported. Yet we knew we were a part of something much bigger, an age-old movement of women rising to protect the environment and our communities. In that first moment together, we were silent. We stood there in a circle, holding hands, just feeling the power of what could be possible. And then one woman, Sizani, spoke. She voiced what we all felt in that moment. She said, "I've traveled thousands of miles across the world to be here, and I finally feel like I've come home." In that moment, we understood this could be bigger than any one of us. This wasn't about the 30 of us in that room. We were preparing because we knew what was coming. We knew that as environmental destruction worsened, so would the harm on our world's women. We needed to get ready. And we also knew something else, that the future would depend on women leading the way in their own communities, because real change doesn't trickle down, it rises up. We emerged with a blueprint for Women's Earth Alliance, and I remember thinking, could this one circle, this unified, clear vision, this resounding yes, really multiply? 2 decades later, we have that answer. Last year, we traveled to Kakamega, Kenya, where some of WIA's longest-standing programs are flourishing. Kakamega is home to Kenya's last remaining tropical rainforest. It is a vital carbon sink for our world. But years of deforestation and climate change has put this ecosystem and the communities who rely on it at risk. And that's why WIA has been working here for years, and why the work of women leaders in this region matters so much right now. So there we were in Kakamega, standing with the community in the shade of trees that just 10 years ago did not exist, and on land that had only recently been barren ground. I remember standing among the trees. Where we stood was WIA leader Melissa Mwimali, excited to tell her story. Not long ago, Melissa had no land rights, no economic opportunities, no clear path forward. She said to us, "Before I found WIA, we were not allowed to plant trees as women. We were not allowed to be leaders." But Melissa was not having that. She joined a WIA accelerator. She learned from Kenyan leaders who had once been where she was. With technical training, mentorship, and business support, she gained the skills to forge a new path. So in just 1 year, amidst a global pandemic, she mobilized a women's group that planted 200,000 tree seedlings. She produced and distributed life-saving soap. She installed 200 clean cook stoves for families, and she began to build the work. A next round of WIA training supported her to launch her farm enterprise. She provided fresh food and natural fertilizer for households across her village. Today, she's trained 400 women to build their own sustainable livelihoods. And standing beside her that day as she spoke to us was her daughter, now attending university, made possible by the income that Melissa now earns. And surrounding her were the men of the community, listening with quiet respect and support. And looking up at her were the children. It's not just Melissa. Across Kenya, we women are restoring native seeds, native trees. They're monitoring the forest health. They're educating their communities on climate resilience. And they're starting small businesses that provide an important alternative to logging and poaching. The impact of these leaders has been so profound that the Kenyan government has recently designated hundreds of hectares to these women's groups to steward and restore. Melissa will be the first to tell you that she could have never done this alone, and that she will not take a single step forward without bringing others alongside her. She embodies what the women of this alliance know deep in our bones. We are not isolated. We are not working alone. We are part of an interconnected web. WIA exists to ensure that the women who are literally safeguarding a thriving future for all of us not only have what they need, but have what they need to lead.
Because we know what happens when we do. When women unite to protect our homelands, restore our watersheds, and pass on traditional knowledge, something extraordinary occurs. My family and I lived in Indonesia, where Women's Earth Alliance works in 26 provinces. It was just after the pandemic, when the country was recovering from a seismic standstill. Government aid was slow, supply chains collapsed, and the systems people were depending on weren't moving fast enough to meet the urgency of the moment. In this unprecedented time, the grassroots power of Women's Earth Alliance became as clear as day. WIA leaders did what they've always done. They mobilized. I visited Women's Earth Alliance food banks, seed banks, and microbanks, all springing to life with speed and precision. They were led by trusted women leaders in these communities. Whether it's WIA leaders in Mexico launching aquaculture businesses, women in India bringing safe water to their communities, or women in Florida transforming food deserts into thriving farms, this groundswell of leadership is on the rise. The story of Women's Earth Alliance is one of believing in a future on its way. Even as climate change threatens more poverty, extreme heat, sea level rise, habitat loss, hitting women and our children first and worst, we know that drought-barren lands can become restored. Devastated forests can become biodiverse habitats. And communities suffering from hunger and violence can become healthy, peaceful, and self-sustaining. What began with belief has become strategic, coordinated action. Since our start, Women's Earth Alliance has trained and funded more than 53,000 women leading environmental initiatives in 31 countries. Reaching more than 24 million people with life-saving climate solutions. When this work began nearly 20 years ago, almost no one was asking women for our solutions. Funders, institutions, governments, they weren't seeking out grassroots women's leadership. But we didn't wait for the invitation. We asked everyone we knew for support, and so many of you are here today. Region by region, collaboration between women on the front lines emerged, with leaders expanding our solutions on our own terms. Together, we built programs rooted in real community needs And now governments, funders, and institutions, they come to Women's Earth Alliance leaders around the world, seeking their knowledge, their strategies, their vision. They want to know what's working on the ground. They want to know how our networks navigate crises, build local economies, and design with a long view. This should tell us something. I think it's safe to say that all of us have had the experience of being on the outside of power, watching decisions unfold without our voices in the room. And it's easy to think that someone else is working on it, that we need to wait until we're experts to act, that we need to wait for governments to lead. But here's what we've seen over and over again. The way forward isn't waiting for institutions or governments. It's about building alongside those who have been leading all along. We don't need more proof. We don't need more approval. We only need the momentum that grows when we implement solutions, not only in the work of Women's Earth Alliance, but for everyone here, right now.
Right now, there is so much focus on the big levers of change, on elections and policies and corporate pledges. And yes, those things matter. Yes, they are incredibly, incredibly important. And history has shown us that change rarely starts from the top. It begins with people who refuse to wait. It begins in communities where leaders are seeing a problem and deciding to do something about it, even when the odds feel insurmountable, especially when the odds feel insurmountable. And yet, we hear the same critique over and over again. Grassroots action is too small. It's too local. It doesn't move the needle at the scale we need. But that's a misunderstanding of how transformation happens. We've seen the way grassroots movements don't stay small. They aren't proprietary. They don't stay contained. Instead, they replicate and multiply. I think about We a Leader, Morningstar Gali, and the Pitt River Nation's fight to protect Satitla, Medicine Lake Highlands. Yeah. For decades, Morningstar, her family, her tribe, and indigenous leaders across California stood up to corporate and government interests that wanted to turn this sacred place into a geothermal development site. Now, this is not my community, but as an indigenous person, as a woman, this matters to me because this is a story I know. I know what it's like to stand up to forces and interests that want to erase our histories, our lifeways, our very existence. Morningstar and her community were up against enormous opposition. They weren't the ones with the money or the political influence, but they had something else. They had community and they had an unshakable commitment. So they organized, they fought legal battles, they mobilized allies across movements, and because of their relentless effort, in January, the US finally designated Satitla as a 225,000-acre national monument. And while the current political landscape has cast some uncertainty on the designation, one thing is certain. This fight is not over. Because this fight, which started as a local fight, a grassroots fight, didn't stay local. It grew into a much larger movement that is reshaping policy and demanding government action to protect land and water for all of us. Because as we all know, protecting the earth and our communities is never something that just benefits a few people. Safeguarding Satitla also protects critical aquifers that store as much water as California's 200 largest reservoirs combined. This sacred place sustains millions of people. Major cities like San Francisco, and this state's vast agricultural landscape. And this isn't just one story, this is a pattern. Because the truth is, this is how change always happens. So, if you've ever felt like your action in your town or your community isn't big enough, I want you to remember that the most powerful movements in history have always begun with just a handful of people who stepped forward. And that same kind of spirit is needed now more than ever. You know, earlier, Melinda shared a story of the circle that gave rise to WIA and of a woman who described her experience as one of coming home. And this sense of belonging, of knowing that you're part of something bigger and being in relationship with everything around you is something my ancestors understood. In Olelo, Hawaii, the word for land is aina, and it means that which feeds us. But in our oldest language, in our mother tongue, aina also means family. Because even with the words we use, we understand that the earth is never a resource. It's a relative. It is a living and breathing being that takes care of us like we take care of it. What would shift in our society if we all embraced this kind of kinship? If we all recognized the earth as a mother or a grandmother, one who reminds us that this collective family, all of us, is something that we sustain and tend and build together. You know, we will all tell the story of this moment.
We will tell of a time when the challenges we faced were immense, but we stepped forward with courage.
We will tell of the alliances we built, the communities we strengthened, and the ecosystems we restored.
Let's ensure that this story of our collective power is something we're proud to tell for generations to come. Mahalo nui, aloha aina kako.